Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're going to talk for a little bit about the Atlanta Hawks. They were one of those teams that coming into the season felt like were capable of taking a little bit of a jump. They've had a couple of down years since they made the Eastern Conference Finals back in 2021, and this felt like a season where they could try and get back to a little bit of relevancy. They looked a lot better at the end of last season under new head coach Quin Snyder. They're now going to have a full season under him. Another year of Trae Young and Dejounte Murray to gel a little bit together. Perhaps a big bounce back year from Trae Young. After all offseason, people were talking kind of crazy about Trae Young and his game. So I felt like he could be in for a bit of a revenge tour of sorts. They had some young players that felt like they could take a little bit of a jump. Maybe a Jalen Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu and AJ Griffin amongst others. It just felt like this was going to be a more cohesive experience from the Atlanta Hawks and that they were going to get back to being one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, rather than a team that consistently found themselves just barely sneaking into the Eastern Conference playoffs. So far, relative to these expectations, this Hawks season has been nothing short of a disaster. As I'm recording this, they're currently 10-15, tied with the Raptors for the 10-11 spot in the Eastern Conference. They're a full 3 games behind the 9-seeded Brooklyn Nets, and just 1 game ahead of the 12-seeded Chicago Bulls. To make matters worse, it's been getting worse. They started the season just kind of mediocre, win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose 2, stuff that we've seen from the Hawks over the past couple of years, but now they've lost 6 out of their last 7 games, 7 out of their last 9. It's become a snowball effect. They just cannot seem to get wins. They can't seem to put together any competent stretches. They just don't at all look like the team they were supposed to be coming into this season. The main reason for this has been their defense. Last season, they were bad on that end. They were a bottom 10 defense. I think they were the 22nd ranked unit in the league. But this season, it's gotten even worse. They're currently a bottom 4 defense with a defensive rating of 119.3. The only teams that they're better than on that end are the Pacers, the Wizards, and the Hornets. And those 3 teams aren't exactly getting stops pretty much ever. They're giving up the 4th most points in the paint. They're laying up the 7th best 3-point percentage in the NBA, which, by the way, this Hawks team gives up maybe the most wide open corner threes that I've ever seen from any defense ever. Basically, if a team forces the Hawks to make like 3-4 rotations, they're probably getting a somewhat wide open shot. Whatever the opponent does, wherever they are, they're probably going to find a way to score against this Hawks team. There's no resistance whatsoever. Part of that is the fact that the Hawks don't have really any elite defenders at all on this roster. They don't even have really that many good defenders on the team. DeAndre Hunter has his moments, and he was one of their better defenders years ago, but the more that I watch him, the more that it feels like he's regressed on that end. He's getting lost a lot off ball, on ball. He's getting torched by a lot of big time matchups. It just doesn't seem like he's that stopper that he used to be. Jalen Johnson has some moments, but he's still a young, growing player. They rely a lot on him offensively, too, when he's in the lineup, so he gets lost a lot off ball, too. Clint Capella is nowhere near the elite defensive big he used to be. There used to be moments where they could have all these collapses on the perimeter, but because Clint Capella was such a force down low, it didn't matter as much. But now with Capella being a bit slower than he used to be, being a step behind his usual defensive play, he can't clean up all those mistakes anymore, so he's getting torched down below. And Onyeka Okongwu has not come along as the defensive big of the future I was hoping he would be. Dejounte Murray is not at all the defender we saw him as in San Antonio. He's got more of an offensive role here, and he's just overall taking a big step back on the defensive end. Really the only guy on this entire team that has exceeded my expectations defensively this season has probably been Trae Young. Now, he's not a good defender, but he's no longer the worst defender in the league, and at the very least, he's trying. He's putting a lot of effort in on that end, despite always being limited by his physical attributes. Like, he's not the biggest guy. He's like barely 6 foot. It feels like the wingspan's not there. He doesn't have the biggest frame. He's never going to be a big defender because of those physical limitations, but he's giving it his all. He's working on that end. He's hustling. He's fighting past screens. I've been genuinely impressed with Trae Young's defense. Again, it's not great, but at least he's putting the effort in. And speaking of Trae, he's one of the only reasons this Hawks team is at all stayed afloat over this stretch. He's at the moment playing some of the best basketball of his career. Last season, like I mentioned earlier, it was a bit of a down year, but he's bounced back in a big way after again struggling to begin this season, and he's back. It feels like Trae Young is again playing like himself. Over these last 9 games, he's averaging 31.1 points per game, 11 assists, 3 boards on 47% shooting from the field, and 39.6% from deep. He's playing his butt off right now. Legitimately been one of the best offensive players in the league so far this season, like Trae Young was for years, but he's not really getting much help whatsoever. It doesn't matter if Trae Young puts up 31 and 11 every game on good efficiency when not a lot of other players are contributing and the other team is scoring like 150 points per game, it feels like. One guy in particular who's been letting Trae Young down has been Dejounte Murray. They gave up 3 first-round picks and a pick swap for him a couple years ago, and Dejounte has rarely, if ever, consistently looked like the all-star he was back in San Antonio. He's had some moments, like there are some games where he's putting up 30 points, 40 points, playing some pretty good defense, and you're like, this is the two-way guy that we traded for to put next to Trae Young. And then most other nights, you're wondering where that guy went. Over the last 11 games where they've really been struggling, he's shooting just 41% from the field and 31% from deep. And on the season as a whole, he's putting up 20 points per game, 4.4 boards, and 5.5 dimes to go with 44.6% shooting from the field and 36.7% from deep. They're not bad numbers, but they're not the numbers of a guy who's supposed to be your second option, the guy that you traded multiple first-round picks for. He's been disappointing, and this is even coming from a guy who really didn't like the fit between Trae Young and Dejounte Murray when the trade happened. I was one of a few people that was like, I don't know if this is going to work. Neither one of them is prolific off ball. Also, Dejounte Murray gets a lot of tunnel vision, which he's shown a lot of times here in Atlanta, especially as of late. I just don't love the fit, and it feels like he's not at all the ideal second star to put next to Trae Young. Probably a lot better as your third guy if possible. There's also the fact that the Hawks just aren't getting much progression from the young guys who I thought were going to take jumps this year. Onyeka Okongwu is one of the big ones. I was huge on him going into the draft. I bought a lot of stock into him. I've thought for years now, this is the season that he takes Clint Capella's starting job and establishes himself as one of the best young bigs in the league, but consistently, he hasn't lived up to the hype. He's just not ready offensively or defensively to take the reins as that starting center. Against the Cleveland Cavaliers, he got destroyed, just doesn't have the size to keep up with some of those bigs, the physicality. He doesn't stretch the floor particularly well. He can knock down threes better than Clint Capella, but he's shooting just 30% from deep. He's just not ready, and I thought for years now, this is the season that he finally takes that leap. It just still has not come. AJ Griffin felt like a prime breakout candidate after a lot of big moments last season, multiple game winners, but he hasn't played much because when he has played, he hasn't been very good on either end of the court. I would still like him to get some more minutes to see if maybe, hey, when he establishes a rhythm, he kind of gets back to that guy he was last year, but it just hasn't been pretty when he's actually played. DeAndre Hunter feels like the same player he's been for years. Saddiq Bey is a good floor spacer at 24 years old, but the defense is basically non-existent. It feels like they've got so many solid players, but not a lot of special ones. Not to mention one of the only young guys showing promise this season in Jalen Johnson is currently injured. When he was playing, he was one of their best players, maybe their second best player on most nights. He was putting up 14 points per game, 7 boards, 2.5 assists, and 1.1 steals, shooting 59.4% from the field and 42.5% from deep. He looked really, really good as a connecting wing, a guy that gave them some size, some rebounding, all things that they really need. He was great in transition. He and Trae Young had great chemistry, knocking down outside shots. He was probably their second best player outside of Trae Young most of the games that he showed up in. But currently right now he's out for, I think, at least like 6 more weeks or something like that. So they desperately miss him now. They're going to continue to desperately miss him. And his absence is part of the reason they're struggling at the moment. But even when he was playing, they were hovering right around 500. They were mediocre at best. And outside of Jalen Johnson, they've been relatively healthy compared to most of the league. They've actually been one of the healthiest teams in the league so far, yet they're still not playing well. So the Hawks are really struggling despite Trae Young playing some of his best basketball, being pretty healthy compared to the rest of the league. You've got new head coach in Quin Snyder who's supposed to fix these issues. You're not getting progression from your young players. Your secondary star isn't producing the way that you thought he would when you traded for him, especially on the defensive end. It's kind of a mess right now over there in Atlanta. What is the next step? What do they do from here? Well, I guess one possible option is making a third star trade. That's been something they've been rumored to be interested in as of late. And for the past year or so, a name that's been tied to them consistently is Pascal Siakam. He's a guy that I think would help this team out a lot. He would give them some size in the front court, some rebounding, some defense, all things that they really need, as well as just adding an extra punch to them on the offensive end. Maybe a more consistent second option for Trae Young. I think the two of them could work pretty well together. They don't need a lot of spacing because Siakam isn't the best shooter in the world. They already have a decent bit of spacing around Trae at the moment. I just think his physicality would help a good bit in the front court. He's not the perfect pairing, but I do think he's pretty good. The question is, though, is he going to be enough for this team? You're probably going to have to give up some of your young pieces, maybe like an AJ Griffin, a Kobe Buffkin, some salary filler. The Raptors are a team that really likes to get the most out of their stars, especially dealing him in conference. I feel like despite the expiring contract, they're going to try and get the most out of the Hawks in this type of deal. And if you have to give up a decent bit, even if you don't have to give up a decent bit, is Siakam enough to make you a contender in the Eastern Conference? How far up does he realistically move this team that has a lot of extra holes outside of the ones that Siakam would fill. It definitely doesn't put them on the tier of the Boston Celtics. I think the Sixers would still be better. I think the Bucks would still be better. So at the best, they're maybe like the 4th team in the Eastern Conference. And I think there are still some other teams up there in that realm that could still be better than the Hawks, depending on what the trade package looks like. If he doesn't agree to sign a deal after you trade for him, he could also just walk in the offseason. So I don't even know if adding a star in Siakam is the best deal possible. But he does feel like the only star that's out there in the market right now that makes sense. Like Levine doesn't make any sense. DeRozan doesn't make any sense. Jeremy Grant's a name that maybe makes sense, but I don't think he moves the needle that much. Same thing with Kyle Kuzma. Like Siakam's the guy that I think clearly makes the most sense for this Hawks team, but I don't know if he changes enough for this Hawks team to be that guy that they like have to go out there and get. But then again, I don't know who that guy is. It's a weird spot that the Hawks are in. And if they do go out there and make a trade for Siakam, I don't blame them whatsoever, because it's probably a move they're going to have to do. There have been rumors for the past year or so, 2 years, whatever, that Trae Young might be one of the next big stars to go ahead and ask for a deal. Really, ever since that 2021 Eastern Conference Finals run, he's consistently said in the media that he wants to win. He wants to get more taste of that winning deep playoff run type basketball that he hasn't seen since a few years ago. And if they go into the rest of the season, say they enter the playoffs again as a bottom of the barrel seed, they get destroyed in the first round like has been the case over the past couple of years, they might even make the playoffs, so that's also an outcome. Like if any of those things happen, it's now been 3 straight years of that. The Hawks are in a weird spot where it doesn't feel like there's a lot of room for improvement right now with the roster. What does Trae Young think? They've tried a couple of different coaches. Does he go out there and request a trade? Is this the beginning of the end for the Trae Young era? So maybe they have to make a trade to try and save Trae Young, keep him in town as that franchise star, because I do still think Trae Young is a special talent and the Hawks can't afford to lose him. But the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. They do manage to lose him within the next few years. All in all, the Hawks have just been incredibly disappointing so far, and this may just be the beginning for a really tumultuous period in the franchise's history. I think it was Zach Lowe who recently named them the most disappointing team of the season so far, and I don't blame him for saying that, because I had expectations for this team. I thought they're going to be a lot better than this. Trae Young is having the revenge season I thought he was, but it hasn't mattered at all because the rest of the team's been really lackluster. I don't know. Let me know down below in the comments what you think the Hawks should do. Do you think they'll turn this thing around, or do you, like me, think this might be the beginning of the end of Trae Young in Atlanta? I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.